Welcome to Aquarian Diary, where we discuss issues around the emerging age of Aquarius. I'm your host, John Irving. Thank you for joining me. Greetings all, it is March 20th, 2022. Happy equinox. Today I want to talk about something that I think is extremely important. Of course, I've been following the situation in Ukraine, and I have been spending a lot of time reading about that and contemplating why we are experiencing something like this, which we haven't really seen since the 20th century. And I have been asking myself and wondering why and how someone like Putin can even exist in this world. There are now multiple millions of refugees from Ukraine. The entire global system has been disrupted and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. And all of this seems to be based on one individual's egocentric actions and desires. And of course, how does one person gain so much power and influence is a stunning question to contemplate. Like I said, we're not unfamiliar with that in the 20th century, but I certainly did not expect to see something like this occur in the 21st century. Then again, I didn't expect that we would see leaders like Trump in the 21st century either. And this shift towards authoritarianism and mass delusion, which we have been seeing playing out on so many fronts, this incredible level of polarization between those who are reality-oriented and those who are not. And of course, all of this can be quite disturbing to contemplate, although, like I've said before, it has brought many countries in the world together to stand up to, insofar as it's possible, to this global threat. And as those of us who are consciously members of the spiritual community contemplate what we can do about this, I have seen people advocating for sending protective energy to people like Zelensky and the people of Ukraine. And that, to me, seems like a Band-Aid solution, trying to fix the symptoms rather than address the root problem. And the root problem is this, is that everything that we're experiencing here on Earth is a manifestation of, or an amalgam of, our individual states of consciousness. And obviously here on Earth, there are people with all different levels of degrees of consciousness and awareness. Otherwise, this would not be happening. We would not be experiencing this. Say, for example, if you're a more highly evolved or more spiritually aware person, all of this may seem extremely unjust and unfair, if not outright crazy, which is how I perceive it. It just is insane why we're experiencing this sort of thing. And yet, as I argued in my episode on complacency, we have all played a role in allowing this to happen. And some have argued or put forward the notion that on some level, these people who are suffering, the people of Ukraine, are playing out this drama that they have a soul contract to fulfill in order to wake the world up or to show the world how it needs to change or evolve. I'm not sure how far that logic actually holds, because I believe the last count now, there's over 3 million people who have been displaced. And these people are going through tremendous suffering. Many of them are actually being wounded or killed in this war of terror. And we know now that people who go through profoundly traumatic experiences will carry that trauma with them for the rest of their lives in many ways. And it'll even pass on generationally through their offspring and in subsequent generations, genetically, for 7 generations, it is said. This has certainly been proven to be true in the case of the indigenous communities in, for example, Canada, where I am, who were profoundly damaged for many generations after some of the atrocities that occurred to them and their people. And so I personally find it a little hard to believe that millions of people volunteered to go through this experience and that it's not just the actions of a madman who has assumed a phenomenal degree of power militarily and through a repressive regime and unbridled kleptocracy. And that's kind of a separate debate. In other words, do we need to have these kinds of experiences or shocks collectively, or are they just a byproduct of evil? Because there's no question that this is evil, what's happening. Evil has been able to penetrate and engage with the realm of human affairs because there are openings in our collective consciousness which allows this to occur. And I did a whole episode on does evil exist? And I myself have encountered beings who, from my own perspective, are at the very least profoundly damaged and dangerous beings, if not evil, which is deliberately and consciously being aligned with darkness. Now, if the logic of people volunteering to experiencing such traumas holds, and the generations that follow them and all of the other people peripherally traumatized by such events, if that logic holds, then it suggests that torture, degradation, humiliation, suffering, and agony, which often results in a downward spiral, which could last multiple lifetimes, is a legitimate part of the spiritual path. So consider that. Is profound suffering and grief, loss, and literal torture, because that's what many in Ukraine are experiencing, a legitimate and necessary spiritual experience? Is that necessary for our evolution? Now, it's possible that I and others, maybe some of the people listening to this, aren't from here and this is all foreign to us. Or it's possible that that's just all bullshit. That is a form of justifying these horrific events that occur in our world, glossing over them and giving them legitimacy. And of course, it's easy to speculate about such things when we are thousands of miles away from the actual devastation that's occurring. Think about that. It's a very important point to consider. Is this legitimate or not? I say no. I say if we are wanderers, if we volunteered to come here, we came here to stop this bullshit from happening because it's not legitimate or necessary or desirable in any way. So, as you can see, it irks me, to say the least, when I hear spiritual justifications for genocidal slaughter of innocent human beings and the destruction of precious elements of civilization. Spiritual justifications for war have been used in the past, as anyone familiar with history should know. And I believe most of us would agree that war should be a thing of the past. And so, like I said, we can do things like energetically send love and light to the people of Ukraine, which I'm not suggesting we shouldn't, or to anyone who's suffering, for that matter, as long as we don't breach their free will. But beyond that, humanity needs to decide that it no longer wants to experience these kinds of things. What I'm going to suggest is that we use our conscious will and intention to decide that this and things like it are no longer acceptable. Strong chills here. Very strong. So what we need to do is just simply make a very clear distinction and decision and clarification that this sort of activity is no longer acceptable to us individually. It's been said that light workers or people who are more aligned with their spiritual nature are more powerful energetically. So like I said, we decide that these kinds of actions and activities are no longer acceptable and that we reject them. And if enough people with powerful minds and powerful beings make such decisions, it will gradually alter reality. Strong chills here too. And this is how we will shine light on the darkness. Now, no doubt someone will listen to this at some point and not have any idea of what I'm talking about or suggesting, or think that I'm completely crazy, that we can shift our thinking and alter reality. But anyone who has studied spiritual path and spiritual literature, which has been provided over thousands of years, will recognize that that is a very prominent and common thread in those teachings. That we shape reality based on our perception and past experience and self-awareness, or the lack of self-awareness. And that as more minds are focused on a particular objective, the results can manifest exponentially. And this is territory that our current civilization has not explored much. So, it is no longer acceptable to us, for example, that one country can invade another country against their free will. This kind of war that is aggressive and assertive rather than defensive, because there may be times when we do need to defend ourselves. But in this case, this was an unprovoked invasion on the part, essentially, of one man. That is no longer acceptable. It is no longer acceptable for me that one man have the power or ability to illegally invade another country against its free will. Now, the fact that this is happening points to a level of corruption in our government, in our economic policies, in our foreign policies, and in our economies. I spoke about how Europe was dependent on Russian oil and gas, the proceeds of the sale of that oil and gas. Without them, this invasion would have been far less likely, if not impossible, because Putin would not have been able to afford to do this. There's the kleptocracy that surrounds him, where there's a handful of a few multi-billionaires who have stolen vast amounts of money from the Russian people, keeping them impoverished and enslaved effectively. Now their media is shut down to the point where most people in Russia, unless they're using VPNs, have no idea what's happening in the rest of the world, or in particular Ukraine. To me, this level of control and subjugation and oppression is completely unacceptable, and I no longer want that to happen on Earth. I also think it's very important that we make related decisions, such as that those who are in positions of power or authority or privilege anywhere in any country who have abused their power, authority, or privilege be held accountable for those abuses, and that their abuses be brought to light so that they can be addressed and exposed. Decide that people who have abused their power, privilege, or authority in ways that harm other people be brought to justice, and that their misdeeds be brought to light and to the awareness of the public. We need to bring down the criminals in our societies who enable atrocities to occur. And to me, the fact that millions of people starve, the fact that millions of people are impoverished, the fact that millions of people are misinformed through disinformation with often deadly consequences is an atrocity. For example, take what's happening with the global climate. For decades, scientists have been warning us about what is looming. It's even worse than was anticipated. The news gets worse every day, and yet nothing has been done about it. Why is that? That is because of disinformation and the manipulation of our democratic systems by vested interests, the fossil fuel industry, and so forth, whose profits would be threatened by action to address that epic issue. So not only do we need to bring to light those who finance disinformation, but the purveyors of disinformation themselves, those that spread lies with the aim of deceiving the public in ways which will harm them, and in many cases, for generations. In addition to the natural world, which our survival is utterly and completely dependent upon. I pray that they are held karmically responsible for what they are doing and what they have done. But in order to stop these kinds of atrocities from occurring, we need to expose what they're doing, bring it to the attention of the public, and have them be held accountable for that publicly. Not in some distant lifetime or down the road. We need these changes to occur now, and we need them to occur desperately. We seek a world of justice and fairness for all, and anything that is largely an impediment to that has to be brought down. And like I said, the way we're going to do that is we're going to have the people who are profiting from the suffering of others or enabling that be held accountable for their crimes against humanity by deciding that that is no longer acceptable and that we are no longer willing to experience that. We have to be careful not to direct our energy at people who are innocent. There are many good people within government and within institutions who are doing the best they can, but there are many who are thwarting them and who are enabling this incredibly unjust system to persist. And there are ones who are even literally trying to undermine things like democracy and take away people's freedoms and human rights. These would be the ones that we need to focus on the most. So ideally, we focus our attention at the very top and work our way down. We may not even know the names of the people who are most responsible for these atrocities. They may simply not be known to the public. But we can ask for Spirit to assist us in making this happen. We can allow Spirit to decide who to channel this energy towards. But what we can do as individuals is decide that we don't want to experience this anymore. We want justice. We want egalitarianism. We want fairness. We want health and happiness and enlightenment for all. And anything that is a significant impediment to that needs to be released or cleared. You don't need to repeat this over and over and over again. Find an opportunity where you can be in a concentrated state. Do whatever rituals or routines you use for grounding and clearing yourself. Ask Spirit to let it be known that it is your intention and your will to no longer allow these kinds of atrocities to occur. And let Spirit direct that energy. We live in a free will world, And we can't impose our will on others without their conscious consent, but we can shift our own reality, and our reality then will influence realities around us. So I hope this makes sense. If you find this powerful, please share it with others. If we can get a critical mass of people to just have this be part of their being, that none of this is acceptable anymore, the systems will crumble. And there may be some crumbling involved because we are going to be tearing down structures that have existed for millennia, really. And it will take some time to find and implement new systems. But the first thing we have to do is get rid of the rot, the corruption. This is what, for example, was going on with the U.S. Pluto return. Please just decide that none of this is acceptable anymore, and that we demand something better. Better, more positive, more fair, more just, more divine for all. Now, none of this negates what I said in my episode about complacency. This is not an excuse for inaction in more practical ways. In the same way that we must ask to receive, we must express our will consciously and with intention. So don't assume that just because you've always found that these kinds of things piss you off, that that's the same thing as expressing your intention and your desire, formally and officially. That's why this sounds simple. And it is. But it requires being very clear about your intentions and declaring them, putting your will behind your intentions, and believing in your intentions unflinchingly. And when you have done that, don't worry about them. Just let them go. If you worry about them or question them, it will draw energy from them. And if you're a novice at these kinds of things, which is fine, one of the most important lessons that you can learn is that you have to be careful what you wish for, and that what you're wishing for is actually what you want. Because once you get it, you may find out that it isn't. So think it through very carefully before you set your intentions on things. I have personally found that often what I think I want isn't actually what I want, but I don't know that until I get it. And sometimes you can be stuck with things that are hard to get rid of or not pleasant to get rid of. Now, that's not much of a concern with respect to what I've been discussing here today, because clearly what I'm suggesting would be in the highest good of all. One more thing, I often feel like I'm not lecturing my listeners. I'm just simply expressing or validating what you're already thinking or what you already know. And there's an important role for that. So, sometimes if I state the obvious, or what to you seems obvious, bear that in mind. I consider you my peers, and we're just connecting. All right, thanks for viewing. Thanks for sharing. I've got such a huge list of things to talk about, but I only get these rare opportunities to record, so I apologize for that. My time will come. Let it be known that I am with all of those who are against all of that. Time to stop it. We don't need to experience this level of chaos and human rights abuses and crimes against humanity to learn these lessons. The lessons are already quite clear and self-evident. Let me know in the comments if you set your intentions on this. Take care. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.